Research shows that although 4 out of 5 entrepreneurs believe they have a good, if not certain, chance of success, 74% of new startup businesses fail, most often due to overconfidence and loss aversion. But wait, there's more. Research also states that decision makers tend to intensify their commitment, even when they know they're in a failing course of action. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because optimism and confidence are wonderful traits, but sometimes they lead to overconfidence and a refusal to take our foot off the accelerator, and that can spell trouble.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Dr. Vincent DiFilippo, is a professor in the School of Accounting and Business at Monroe College. Prior to that, he was CEO of a private equity fund in Hong Kong, raising several $billion in venture capital for entrepreneurs and publicly traded companies throughout the Asia-Pacific region. His new book is Breaking Point: How Escalation of Commitment is Destroying the World and How You Can Save Yourself. Published May 3rd, 2023. We're happy to have you with us. And welcome to the show, Vincent.
Thank you very much for having me, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. You can call me Rob. We'll do just fine. Good to have you on here. And let's dive right in. You know, one of the things that I found really interesting as I was looking over your materials is optimism and confidence are two traits that I deeply admire, and two traits that are found, I think, in most really good entrepreneurs. And you know, we program ourselves. The harder the journey, the harder that we fight. And then you go into something that you refer to as irrational escalation of commitment. I feel like you're telling me there's no Santa Claus, but walk me through this. Talk me off this ledge. I'm out on a ledge right now.
You're exactly right. You know, as entrepreneurs, what are we taught? Persist until we succeed. Have a positive attitude, optimism. Never say die attitude. Right. And I am all of that. And I preach all of that. Right. Especially to some of the young, students that I mentor. But, there comes a time where, we have to cut our losses, or we have to adapt, because we live in a global environment that rapidly changes on a day-to-day basis, from a political standpoint, social standpoint, trading standpoint. Markets go up and down, asset classes go up and down. And technology advances, sometimes disruptively, sometimes for our benefit. So as leaders, as entrepreneurs, we're the big picture thinkers. We always have to stay be optimistic about our vision, our passion, right? But there comes a time where we have to stop, where keep on going, even when the data changes or when the scenario changes. We keep on going because we're confident in our ability. We're confident in our business model. We put the time in, right? We've done the prototypes. We've done all the heavy lifting. But unfortunately, there's one thing that they don't teach us, or now they're starting to teach us. We as humans have cognitive biases. We have certain characteristics, emotions, things that drive our decision processes. And sometimes we don't even realize it. And I'm one of the biggest victims, or, I've committed a lot of, So, as a young man trading stocks on Wall Street, right? I think about the 90s. You had Microsoft, America Online, Yahoo, all these companies that are the tech, leaders now, right? At that time, markets were booming, right? And I can walk into my office. I can read the Wall Street Journal that day. Oh, that sounds like a good stock. I can buy it and actually make 5-10% of my money that day. Stocks were just moving. Right? Even if I didn't have the best analytical skills, the market was trending in the right direction. So my confidence level built where I thought I can walk on water, right? But as the markets changed, as the economic phases changed and the picture changed, it gets harder and harder. But my confidence level, that irrationality that I have, it kind of dictates, right? So I won't get too heavy into it, but there was a lot of flaws that I had in my decision-making process as a young stock trader, investor. And I didn't know what anchoring was. I didn't know what confirmation bias was. I didn't understand loss aversion, right? And I lost, right? During the internet bubble, okay, the mid 90s, I was a king of the mountain. Come late 90s going into 2000, 2001, we have a stock market crash, right? And then, I'm on the bottom. I rolled down the mountain, okay, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
But if you look,
I got to tell you something, Vincent. You and me both, because as a sales trainer, most of my clients were in the financial industry. So I was the sales trainer that was walking on water until the market corrected. Then all of a sudden they went, maybe this Jollis guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's interesting. I refer to it often in my podcast as instinct versus logic. Even from a training standpoint, I'll just give you sort of my own a little sort of corporate bias. When sales are up, companies are typically flush with cash, but they want to be trained. When sales are down, when they really need to be trained the most, when we're trying to hold on to jobs here, that's when training budgets get cut. That's when we trainers, we speakers, we have to fight. And when you think, shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't you be calling me in while you're struggling? And maybe you don't need to see quite so much of me while people are taking tickets in the lobby. But it's that instinct versus logic. Instinct is powerful.
Sure. And I wasn't aware of my own biases. And then the same thing happened 2008. We had this big run after the crash in 2001. We had a nice run. Rates were low, and we're going into this growth, this recovery phase. Real estate assets, prices are going higher. Markets are doing well. People have cheap money. They can invest, flip homes, and you see there was a lot of fraud and other things that were going on in the background that we may not have been aware of. But that confidence, that fear of losing, that self-justification, we look at the data, right? And then we try to reconfirm it. Even if the scenario changes later, we're reconfirming, well, it hasn't changed that much. My original thought process still stays through. And we make those mistakes. And again, in 2008, you've seen another crash, right?
Yeah.
You look at the history of the markets, you can go all the way back to 1929. There's this cycle, right? And what's the one constant is that there's human beings involved in those cycles. There's decisions being made, okay, that sometimes are backed by emotions that we're really not aware of. So I started to look at, why were there times where I made good decisions, whether it's stock investment, real estate, or other business ventures, and things just went well. And then there was other times where I thought I knew what I was doing, and I felt like an idiot because I lost, right? I bought a stock that went down 40%, or I made a real estate investment that, the market changed right in front of me. And I started to look at my own biases, my own flaws, and I started to look into behavioral finance. And I came across Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Okay, they were two professors. They won the Nobel Prize for economic sciences, and they had an interesting study on. It was called prospect theory, and prospect theory basically talks about a significant part, loss aversion, that we are afraid to lose as humans. We don't like to lose, whether it's a debate, an argument, whether it's in love, when our significant other leaves us, we want to chase them and get them back, or, is it in war and politics? We don't want to lose, especially when it comes to investing. So I started looking to my own behavior as an investor, and was I afraid to lose? And what Kahneman and Tversky basically are saying is, right, when it comes to loss, okay, depending on how it's framed, in a positive light or a negative light, right? If it's framed in a positive light, where I bought a stock at $50 and now the stock, used to trade at 75, now it's gone down to 35. I have this anchor in my head that it may go back to 50, but probably 75 because that was the high on the stock. So I'll put more money in. Even if I'm losing, I bought it at 50, it's at 35. I should have had some risk management in there, maybe got out after a 5% loss, but I'm still holding on to it thinking it's going to recover. What do? I put more money back in, and I try to average down, because we're taught in investments, dollar cost average down the price if you believe in the long term. Okay. So we become what Kahneman and Tversky found out in their research. Okay. They researched this and they proved it in their studies. We become risk seekers in the framing of a loss. Okay. However, the stock goes from 50 to 60 or 70. Now we become risk averse because we don't want to lose the profit. So instead of riding a winning stock and putting more money into it as it's going higher, we're trying to take our money out. So you look at both frames, right? The stock went down. We're putting more money in because we don't want to lose our initial investment. We're hoping to average down and get value back, maybe even make money. Whereas on the other side, stocks going up, we're afraid to lose the profit. So we have that loss aversion still. So we're afraid to lose. So it was an interesting concept. And they won the Nobel Prize in economic sciences. So I can't fault them. Okay.
Wow.
They're much smarter than I. Let's just say that. I didn't win a Nobel Prize yet. The point is, I started looking further. Then when I was studying for my doctrine at Hong Kong Polytech, when I had my private equity fund, I went to school to get my doctrine because I wanted to go back and teach and be a professor and help young entrepreneurs, at least avoid some of the mistakes I made. And I was introduced to another professor by one of my thesis advisors, a Professor Stahl. Stahl had an interesting concept. His concept was that, we make a decision. He focused on project management. We make a decision to maybe build a factory, and we put $10 million into it. And it's a 5-year project to build. And after like year 3, we see that the technology might have become a little obsolete, right? And, it might be better to outsource now. But instead of cutting our loss, we put an extra 5 or 10 million into building out the factory because now the costs have gone up. And we escalate that initial commitment instead of being able to stop. And he found out during his studies, I think he surveyed about 168 project managers in his school. And he found out that there's a couple of things. First of all, for our initial decision, we feel responsible. Okay, we feel responsible that we put the money in there, and that kind of drives us to continue. But he also found out that people have a self-justification bias where they justify the initial data. Like, I made this decision because ABC told me that, down the road, this data is going to produce results to me. And they try to justify that initial data. They don't see that things have changed. They don't see, because of this biases that we have, they refuse to accept that they may have been wrong. And it happens quite often in our business world. So what I did for my thesis was combine the prospect theory and escalation. And because I thought they really were very similar in a sense, we escalate that commitment because we feel responsible. We're justifying our initial decision because we have confirmation bias, right? We're confirming the previous data, even though it may have changed, even though there may be data that's saying, you know what, open your eyes, Vincent, things are not the same from your initial decision. But the reason why we keep on escalating is because we're afraid to lose, which Kahneman and Tversky kind of, outlined for us. So I did some studies, and I did in my MBA, I studied just stock traders, okay? And I did a small pool, and it turned out that most of the stock traders were afraid to lose, right? And I took it further when I did my doctrine. I took a study of 700 Hong Kong stock traders with at least 5 years in the market, with at least 250,000 US in their portfolio that they traded, short-term traders, okay? And I did a study on these 700 traders, okay? We had a pool of 1,500, but I knocked it down to 700. And we found out that about 70% of them, okay? I thought the data could have been higher, but I took out some that didn't complete all the fields necessary. So we had about 70% that shown escalation of commitment when it comes to their investments. When the stock goes down, they're escalating, they're afraid to lose, they're putting money back into their investments, even when the markets have shifted, when the data has changed, and now the trend is showing a downward motion. They're believing, right, that the markets will recover.
A little bit here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm talking so much.
A lot of answer there. Okay. But
if you don't stop me, I'm going to keep on talking.
Yeah,
just so you
All right, everybody, take a deep breath and then watch the road now. Okay. Yeah, you got. I want to go into a bunch of different things you were just talking.
Please.
Cognitive biases. I want to slow down on that a little bit. What's interesting, but I want to be right at the tail end right now. I'm not a great investor. It's just I work a lot in the financial industry. I was always led to believe that when, again, instinct logic, right? When we're supposed to buy low and sell high, it doesn't happen all that often because, when an Apple or a Microsoft or Amazon gets hot, then everybody wants to buy it. When it drops, when in a sense we should be buying it. We want to get out of it. So I've always heard that the real smart investors, when they see a big correction, they're running into that house while we're running out of that house. Do I have my investment theory wrong?
Uh, it really depends, right? It's a bigger answer because then it depends on the cycle. Where are we in the economic cycle? Everything, right? We think about our life, right? We're born, we have a life cycle. We age, our body becomes peak performance, and then it deteriorates as, we get older and the wear and tear, and if we don't take care of ourselves. So we have that life cycle. If we look at our economic picture, right? Every single country, city, every government, we have an economic cycle. We have our peak, right? When things are doing well, everyone's happy, we're making money, assets are producing returns that are acceptable. And then there's that contraction where things start to slow down. Maybe there's government intervention where, they have to raise rates, kind of slow the, the flow of money. And then we go through that contraction to worst case, recession, depression, and then trough, which would be the bottom, right? And at that bottom, what happens again? We have intervention. Rates are lowered, money's pumped into the system, we have a recovery and expansion back to the peak. On and on and on, we can look at this history where we have these cycles. So we as investors, yes, we're taught buy low, sell high, right? We never get the ultimate low, we never get the ultimate high. We're somewhere in the middle. But if we capture a profit, then we did our job as investors, right? So, but it really depends on where we are in those cycles. And we have the ability to adapt.
I got you. The data
problem
drives
is,
it.
what causes our problem then is our own emotions. And when I talk about cognitive biases, there are these biases in our head, our human characteristics where sometimes our emotions get the better of us, right? There's many people, I'm sure you're much better at it than I am, where you can control your emotions. You can kind of stay level-headed. And instead of being an emotional investor, be a scientific investor. Look at the facts. Look at where we are in the economic picture. Look at what the data is showing us for that individual investment, if it's a stock. And then we can make better decisions, right? But that's a whole nother conversation because I take a top-down approach in that regard.
Right,
I look at the big picture and I kind of funnel it down.
Right.
But we still have to know if the data is not clear or the information that we're reviewing or the people where our advisors we're speaking to, if it's not a clear picture, we should pause.
Well,
right?
that's Vincent. That's one of the reasons why I think we need people on the outside. We need a village around us, because your concept of don't keep fighting in that burning building is brilliant to an extent. And what I mean by is this: I'm going to give you an example without naming any names. I've got a friend of mine that is always wanted to be an actor, and when in my 20s I was an actor too, but I needed to keep going. And he never gave up. He went to LA. Now that is over 40 years ago, and it's never happened. And he's doing exactly what you're talking about. He just keeps doubling down. He just keeps putting it in. One day you wake up, and you're 60 years old, and you're still waiting to be an actor. But I admire him. The person I always wanted to meet was, who are the people around him? Who are surrounding this person? In other words, real fast, but it's like a fighter. I think a fighter's job is to go in there with everything they have and throw everything they've got into that round. I don't want a fighter walking over and grabbing a towel and throwing it in. Fighter's job is to fight. The corner's job is to say, there's too much damage. It's not working. We love this fighter. We're going to throw that towel across the ring. In other words, this friend of mine always sort of looked at his parents and went, I know it's easier to keep quiet, but how much longer? How much longer? So my question that I'm trying to get to you is, how, if we're the fighter fighting, we got one eye on our opponent, one eye on the towel. Don't we need somebody else in the picture to help us work this through?
So I agree with everything you just said. And what you're talking about is a support system, right?
Right.
When we're kids, we need a mom and dad or a loving parents, right? Even if it's our foster parents, our guardians, right? We need some type of support, to help us, guide us, right? And we make mistakes when we don't have that, right? We need that loving, safe environment. As we get older, let's say we're in the world now of working, we want to have the right colleagues around us. We want to have the right, boss, supervisor, leader, at least showing us the right way to go. When it comes to being an entrepreneur, I've started a lot of businesses, and not every business has worked out the way that I planned, right? There were lots of learning lessons in between. I've had some great successes, but, I've had some massive, failures, let's say. And I noticed that the times that I failed, I didn't have the right support system. I didn't have that village. Maybe I had a village of idiots, okay? But I didn't have the right people. So now whenever I start a business, I always look for, what are my deficiencies? What am I not good at, right? Maybe my time management, organizational skills could be better. So if that's the truth, and I'm the entrepreneur, the salesman, and the rah-rah leader guy, then I need to have a great executive assistant or an operations person or someone that can help me with, the organizational side, the operational side, the logistics. So I always try to put those pieces in place. I think you do need that. When it comes to investing, there's a lot of support out there, because we might have our stockbroker, our wealth manager, our financial advisor. We might have our accountant, our tax, our CPA. We might have those people giving us advice. Okay. But I always look at the person that's giving you advice, make sure they're experts in their field, right? If I'm looking for sales advice, I'm calling you, right? I'm not calling my mom, even though my mom's a great salesperson. She's been lying to me her whole life. Okay. But the point is, I need a professional that understands the sales cycle, the sales process, how to build relationships, and how to close deals, right? When it comes to that support system, there's a lot of noise in our world. Think about it, Rob. We have there's so much information on the internet. There's so much information around us. Everybody has an opinion, right? It's a lot of noise. How do we block out the noise that's not productive, right? How do we block out the negative people in our lives that are stealing our time? Right? Because that can make us start to have stress, emotional, we can have a bad day, we can miss things. And when we miss things, that's when mistakes happen. Right. So it's kind of, it's both ends of the sword, right? We need the support, we need to analyze the data, but we really need to adapt to changing situations. And that's the most important thing. When it comes to escalating, what I'm trying to point out to is we're not adapting. We're failing to see that there was a change. We're failing to ask for help because we're overconfident. We're failing to seek advice because we think that our initial decision was right and that everybody else is wrong, right? And that comes down to us, right?
Right. And you write about this too. Isn't there an element of just the amount of time and effort that we put into something? Almost, whether it's conscious
Our
or
sunk
unconscious,
costs, right?
why do I want to pull out now? I've already invested X amount of dollars, and I love what you said about sort of the emotional side. I worked for Xerox for a decade, and I was on profit sharing plan, a stock purchase plan. Had a lot of Xerox, and the first time I met with my broker, he was looking at my portfolio, went, "Whoa, you're a little top heavy on the Xerox." I said, "Yeah, blue X's cut me, you'll see." And I said, besides, I'm waiting for the stock to reach 15. That's where it was about 3 months ago or 5 months ago. Vincent, I'm telling you the true story now. 4 years later, still waiting to get to 15. Okay. And, and what I gave up because somehow I had carved this number into my head. And,
That's anchoring.
Right. Exactly. I'm walking your walk. And I had somebody that I respected who, to your point, was the complete opposite of me. If you ever met my financial advisor, very analytical, not funny, not I'm the funny guy. And I didn't want another funny guy. I wanted, but I think part of it is getting the right team in place. And as you said, the other part is listen to the right team you put in place. You put them there for a reason. What I drafted, I've told the story before, but first time I coached a lot of basketball, but started with kids. And the first time I drafted kids, I think there were 12 teams times 8, or a lot of kids going up and down the court. I'm making numbers, and finally we get to drafting. I'm picking guys. When the gym door opened a week later and my team showed up, there were 8 guys who looked exactly like me. They were 8 small point guards that walked in. I drafted an entire team of me. And, we were fast and we did okay. But the next season I said, I need a banger under the boards. I need a guy who can handle the ball. I need a big, I need some power. I need some speed. That's how you assemble a team. But the instinct,
Absolutely.
a lot of times, and we don't do it consciously, is we gravitate to people that kind of look like us and sound like us. And that's not such a good move.
Two parts to your story just now. One, right? We all make bad investment decisions from time to time. No one's perfect, right? You can have 10 great investments in a row, and that 11th one is like, God, what was I thinking? Look at Warren Buffett, right? Everyone loves and knows Warren Buffett, one of our greatest investors of a history of our world, right? He's had advantages, okay, but we won't get into that now. But the point is, let's look at one investment he made, which was a massive escalation of commitment and a loss. In 2013, Warren Buffett and 3G Capital put together $23 billion to buy Heinz, the ketchup company Heinz, and many other products, right? Processed foods and things that we see in the supermarket. And then 2015, they merged Heinz with Kraft, okay, which is another food company, right? Kraft macaroni and cheese.
Kraft's big.
Yeah. They did that at $71 a share. And then the stock kind of stayed in that $60, $70 range. It never went really gangbusters like they thought it would. They thought they were building this massive empire, global company. But unfortunately, they didn't see one critical flaw. People's tastes and their preferences changed, which is something that no one can predict, right? People were living a healthier regime, healthier life. They wanted longevity, wellness, right? They wanted to age well, and they stopped eating processed foods and some of those packaged items that you see from these type of companies, and they shifted. 8 years later, okay, the stock still is almost 44% lower than what they did the deal at. 3G exited their investment at a significant loss. Warren Buffett stayed until the end, and then if he bowed out gracefully because he made so much money from Apple and other investments, he could offset the loss, right, on his balance sheet. But they stayed for 6, 7, 8 years before they understood that the world had changed to this healthier, less processed foods, right? That was one. I mean, and he's made other investment decisions that weren't so great, and he's made great ones as well, right? Everybody has wins and losses. Right. So don't beat yourself up about the investments on your stock. Second thing, what you mentioned was hiring. You recruited people that were like you, right? Which you're a handsome guy, you're lovable. Okay, so it's probably a good thing, right? You had a bunch of wonderful people around you. But when we think about diversity and we think about the team that we're putting together, I never want another Vincent because I'm the salesman running around trying to motivate everybody. Maybe one other person like that's always great to have in the office, but I need some analytical people. I need people that are better managers, better supervisors. I need people that understand organizational, aspects, admin better than I do. I need that person that's a math and science, AI algorithm type person, right? Because that's not me, right? So we need to have that diversity within our organization, especially as entrepreneurs, because those beginning stages, those are the toughest times. When you're working 18 hours a day, you're living off of Red Bull and coffee, and you're trying to just get over that hump, let's say, right? So I always think you need to surround yourself with different people from different ethnicities, different walks of life, different countries, experiences, different schoolings, because they just have different perspectives, and their eyeballs or their brain might give just that solution you need, or just that idea that kind of sparks everybody.
Yeah, right? I was talking to somebody the other day and who had never seen a Star Trek of any kind. I would like to officially go on record as I'm not a Trekkie, but I was 9 years old when the first one came out. I thought it was kind of fun, and so I watched some and not the others. But I was explaining the Next Generation, Star Trek Next Generation, and I was talking about who was on the bridge. And as I went through it, it sort of speaks to your point. I know it's a silly example, but you had Picard, kind of that leader. You had Data, basically a walking computer. You had another person, don't even remember the names, but could feel emotion, where a computer can't feel emotion. You had problem solvers, critical thinkers, emotional thinkers, data-driven thinkers, and together, it demonstrated kind of the perfect team when you really look at it. It was one of everybody, interesting. you ever watch that show?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not sure which one I'm talking about. The Next Generation, I think. That's
Yeah,
the
I've seen a few. I was the Captain Kirk era. Okay,
Yeah,
but
well, I was too, but it was a while ago. We're dating ourselves. You write about something called the sunken cost fallacy. And I think you've, in a sense, been describing it where we're putting a lot in. But I like the
yeah.
story that I saw that from you about the two Mount Everest um,
Expeditions. Yeah.
expeditions and the trouble they got into. Tell that story if you would. I found it interesting.
They even made a movie of it, Everest, okay, not too long ago. But in the real story, these expeditions, they walked up the mountain. Conditions had changed, right? They had a group of people with them, and the conditions had shifted, right? And they chose to go, right? They weren't that far. The people wanted to reach the top, and they chose to go, even though, the weather had gotten worse, right? And the elements had changed, and they weren't prepared. Some of the expeditions prior had oxygen, right, that they would use to go up to that, low altitude, high altitude. They didn't have that. So they persisted to try to succeed. And what happened, to make this a short story, is, people died. Even the leaders of the expedition had suffered. People lost limbs. Okay, in the best case scenario, worst case scenario, lives were lost. But it all could have been avoided. That's the crazy thing. And we see escalation of commitment every single day. Look at January 6th, the Capitol riots. They didn't have to escalate through the building. They could have just protested peacefully outside, right? But then we saw that momentum because emotions got involved. People were amped up. They wanted to be heard, right? And whether you believe it's right or wrong what they did, that's not the point of this. The point is they could have stopped at a certain point. And maybe no one would have been harmed. No one would have been arrested. No jail time. Maybe it would have been a slap on the wrist. Okay. And they still would have been heard, but they escalated. And you can look at all the riots that we've had. There's a point that we have to really think, are we animals? Are we human beings? Okay. How do we keep our emotions in check? Right? Because our emotions, our brain, it's our greatest asset and also sometimes our worst enemy. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and look, the book is called Breaking Point: How Escalation of Commitment is Destroying the World and How You Can Save Yourself. And we speak right to it. It's interesting. I didn't know if you'd be able to bring it home on that January 6th piece, but you did well. All right. We're pumping money and time in and experiencing diminishing returns. I got it. It creates almost a spiral. Other than having a team around us, we got some sole entrepreneurs, etc. How do we break out of that spiral if we don't have a team that's witnessing and watching what we're doing?
Okay, that's a really great point. I think the first thing you have to do is analyze the environment. Okay, has my business environment changed? Has trends changed? Has competition changed? Just try to analyze with an objective type of eyeballs, let's say, or lenses. Right. And then after you analyze, have conditions changed, go back to your initial decision and look at it. Okay. Has my objectives, has my values, my goals from that initial decision, has that shifted because the environment has changed? Okay. If it did, right, then I have to look at what is the data showing me now? Right. Is my initial decision valid based on this new information? But I have to have a clear mind, an open mind to accept that. You know what? The information has changed. Things are different now. My initial thought process, might not be right. I have to have that initiative, and it's hard. It's hard to admit we're wrong, right? Think about it, especially when we're younger. When I was a young man in my 20s, I would never admit I'm wrong. Oh, it's not me, it's you. But now, as I've had more experience in my life, now I'm willing to hold myself accountable, because I think I'm a better leader now, right? So I hold myself accountable. I analyze the data. Right. But the point being is we have to be aware, right? And we have to continually look. You can't just even when you invest in a stock, you can't just buy a stock and 12 months later hope it goes up. You have to continually analyze the news, right? The charts, how's competition? Has their earnings gone down? Any of their competitors? How's that affecting me? You have to kind of have a quarterly type of approach, if not even monthly. When it comes to entrepreneurship and some of these issues we're dealing with on a cognitive level, we have to first be aware of our environment, has something changed? And if it's changed, we have to make the decision, what am I going to do next? Am I going to hire the right people, or at least surround myself with professionals that can help me navigate these challenging times? Or am I going to just stop, pause, and reevaluate, okay, and come up with a solution? Because just because things have changed, I'm not saying you're a failure. What I'm saying is you need to learn how to adapt. Okay. Instead of escalating the same decision-making process, the same course of action, which may not be the right course, we have to adapt. And that's anything in life. We have to adapt on a daily basis. So if we're unwilling, we have a higher probability of having, I don't like to use the word failure. I think a setback,
How about challenges? When I'm
challenges.
teaching salespeople, we take the word problem out of their vocabulary.
Okay.
Customer isn't having a problem, but they're having some real world challenges over there, and they'll speak to it. So,
and I like to ask people that are different to me. I like to ask people, what do you think about this?
Right.
And sometimes, it may start with the people in my office, but I'll go to trusted friends, advisors, people that I respect in my industry. I might even go to my mom and dad sometimes, and basically ask them what they think, because I need to have different perspectives in order to really see a clear picture. That's just that's my trying to process.
Yeah, the 0 8 in me is screaming to get out, because I think whenever I hear a process behavior starting to come forward, it's like I might go back to Xerox days. You didn't tie your shoe at Xerox without a process, but as they say, when you have a way of process, you can measure what you're doing. When you can measure it, you can fix it. I think what you're saying, and it's interesting to me, in the world of training, for instance, we create objectives. It's probably the most misunderstood piece of all of training, because everybody thinks, well, the objective is that you'll feel better about accounting. It's not an objective. We call it the product or a big goal, but an objective is something measurable that you should be able to do when we're done. And when I was teaching trainers at Xerox, I was trying to explain to them that when you're done, I'm going to take you out in the hallway. We're going to talk about it. In a sense, they kind of get a grade, but I said, I'm going to give you an A if you meet your objective, and I'm going to give you an A if you don't meet your objective. Where I can't give you an A is when I ask, did you meet your objective, if you don't know the answer? And, saying things like at the end, you're all going to feel better about blank, prove it. If I say you're going to be able to recite at least 3 things without looking at your book, but they either got 3 or they got 2. So where I'm coming down on this, Vincent, is milestones. As an entrepreneur,
absolutely
talking back at you, my milestone isn't I'm going to generate this kind of income. I want to be here by then. Smaller milestones. And I don't beat myself up for not getting to the milestone, but at least I know where I am, where I have to put different assets in different places, pick that up. My concern is always people put what we call a terminal goal, a big goal. I'm going to, own the industry in 5 years. Good luck. Okay. But tell me where you're going to be in 6 months.
You need to have little wins wins along the way.
And even if you're not there, good, at least we know it. Let's shift our dollars from here to here, or let's reassess. Let's get out of that market and go in this market. But that's the thing. It's smaller little pieces for me, at least.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's what we learn. We learn in goal setting. You have to set your goals, right? So you need that 0 to 12 months, that 2 to 5 years, that 6 to 10 plus, right? You have to have your goals clearly defined and outlined, and you have to have those milestones along the way. Milestones are critical, right? I want to lose 50 pounds, but I can't just say I'm going to lose 50 pounds in 1 month. I have to have milestones, right? Maybe it's 1 pound a week, right? And I keep on checking, and I try to do consistency at least. And if I get 2 pounds, great. As long as I hit my 1 pound, I keep on winning those little wins along the way. Right. Too many people want to go all in and not have the milestones, like you say.
Yeah. And let's not beat ourselves up if we didn't get the 1 pound. What scares me, and actually weight's a very interesting thing. Most people can't really see me, but you probably see me on stuff. I'm not a guy that really is challenged by weight. So I'm not a subject matter expert here, but I know people. Okay. And sometimes when they're failing, they don't want to look at the scale. Okay. And let's leave the world of weight in a hurry right now and go back into business, because we don't want to look at the numbers sometimes, because they scare us. I just want to kind of inject what Vincent's telling you and what I'm telling you, which is don't be afraid. Be afraid if you're not looking. look, you're up, you're down. At least we know where we are. We can make better decisions that way. I think the instinct again is, I don't want to know. I didn't have a good week. I didn't have a good month. That can't be our answer. Or all of a sudden we wake up and we know we're not going to get, we didn't not only not lose 50, we gained 4. We never got there.
Exactly. You said it right, though. At least we know where we are. Those are key
Yeah.
words. We have to know where we are, and we have to keep on checking ourselves. And if things have changed, we have to reevaluate our initial decision, where we are, and how we're going to fill in that gap. If there is a gap, there may not be, right? It really depends.
And I'm going to get all this out of your book when I get that book, right?
You're going to see everything: confirmation bias, anchoring. Think about when you go to buy a car. What's the first thing you do? You see the sticker on the window. That's the anchor, right? You see the sticker price. And then when you go talk to the salesperson, all right, they're just doing their job. That's their career, right? To sell cars. They're like, well, maybe I can drop it down 5,000 or 10,000, right? But you have that anchor. Wow, 50,000 sticker. I can get it for 40. You won, but not really, because the salesperson wanted the 40,
Right.
So we have to understand there's anchors everywhere, especially in the stock market, right? Because stocks always have highs and lows.
Right.
So we have these biases. In the book, we talk about sunk cost fallacy, right? Which, let me think about my loss, right? I had a real estate project. I put in a certain amount of money and I had to make a decision. Do I just sell it as is? I had a buyer, but I didn't, because I had sunk cost fallacy. I was like, well, I could probably make back my money, even though I was losing, if I just finished the project, put another $1 million into it to finish this development. Okay. I'm still underwater with that project. But the point is, if I would have been able to just stop escalating, right? But there's a lot of things that we're not aware of. The book kind of clears some of the stuff. I talk about it, how in relationships, why does someone stay in an abusive relationship? Why do we escalate, right?
Yeah.
Think about on the political side, not that I'm a political person, right? We can't even have a debate. We're afraid to lose, right? Both sides, right? And they escalate arguments instead of saying, hey, Rob, let's figure out a solution to this problem, right? Let's go get a meal. Let's figure it out. Make sure everybody's happy in the end. We don't have that environment, unfortunately.
No.
If you and I were the president, I'm sure we can go get a bite, a couple of drinks, and we'll figure out the problems of the world and we'll iron it all out. Yeah. But no one's as level-headed as us.
No. And it's interesting, jumping back on that car example you gave.
Yeah.
And you're talking about biases. Look at the biases we have to people who sell cars. You were kind. Toyota's been a client of mine for 20 years. So I know the car industry. It's unfair. It's really, not every car salesman is a bad person. Not every,
Sure.
And yet we go in with certain biases. And I think that might be one of the poster children of biases of not just car salespeople, of salespeople. Some salespeople, just to remind everyone, are tremendous consultants, are there to ask you questions you've never asked yourself, are there to move you past your fear of change. My goodness, and some of the examples you've given us, Vincent, what we really need is a salesperson who can take their idea, put it in your head, make you feel like you thought of it, and get out of that real estate deal. Okay. That's what we needed. But, in that village of yours, let me, how about a couple of mentors for you? You look like a guy who's been talking to some people.
I've studied all the Jim Rohns, right? The Andrew Carnegies, the Zig Ziglars. And, by the way, Xerox has probably spit out some of the greatest salespeople in the world, right? They train great salespeople, including you. So, mentors, I've been fortunate to have some good mentors that are unknown. They're just people that admired my work ethic. They had a lot more experience. They took me under their wing. They allowed me to ask them how they became successful. When I was in the mortgage industry, before I started my mortgage company back in 2004 or 5, I worked at a very well-known lender. Okay. I won't mention the name, top originator of loans. And I was a very good salesperson. I was always in the top 10, but I never got to number 1. And there was always one woman that was 1 or 2. Okay. So I decided to reach out to this woman who she might have been in her 40s. I was probably in my early 30s at the time. And I asked her, I basically said, you beat me every single month. All right. I have to know what your secret is. And I tried to make her laugh. And she said, here's my secret. And she showed me, right? Her secret was being well organized. She knew everything about her customers. She knew the kids' birthdays. She communicated with them, as much as possible, given that she worked so hard. And she was just building long-standing bonding relationships. When they had problems in anything, they called her, right? And she taught me an interesting, aspect that she had a Rolodex back then, right? That she didn't have a computer Rolodex. She just did a physical Rolodex. And she always made sure to follow up, right? My follow-up was poor at that time. And I started doing some of the things that she did, the follow-up, recognizing birthdays, just saying hello once in a while, being more responsive and engaging more, which now they teach us in social media. You have to engage, right? Your followers, right? Point is, I went up to number 3. I did never beat her. She was just too good, right?
Well, she had a couple other things she was probably holding back on you.
Yeah,
not giving you the whole chicken recipe, just a little piece of it.
She spoke 2 languages. I was only an English speaker. She had some skills that I couldn't, compete with. She was in a certain community with, Hispanic speakers, right? So, she was able to go to a larger pool. But I don't want to diminish her work ethic. Her work ethic was phenomenal.
No, that's Vincent. That's the one we want people to land on right now. I'm going to throw I'm not going to give you the person's name. Although she listens to these podcasts, she'll probably know when I say it because she's the number 1 realtor in the state of Virginia. And I've gotten to know her. And I will tell you, it's the same sort of thing. You would think, well, she's got a big machine and this and that. No, she pretty much outworks every other realtor. She knows every home in 3 or 4 different counties because she physically goes to them. She'll know them all. And, gee, what a coincidence. She's got a big following because she's a wealth of information. If you're looking for a house, she knows what's on the market, not what's on Zillow. She's physically been in there. If you want to sell it,
domain expertise, right?
Yeah.
Domain expertise, and that's the people we want to work with. When I went to China, I stayed in Asia Pacific for 10 years. I operated my private equity fund out there. I had offices in 8 different countries, and I hit all my goals, let's say financial goals and everything that I wanted, all the posters on the wall of the mansions and fancy cars. I got them. Okay. But I didn't have that success right away. I actually had some obstacles and setbacks because I went in with, I'm Vincent from New York. I'm this great salesperson. I'm going to take over. No one's seen a guy like me before. Well, they didn't want to see a guy like me. Right. And I was in a different culture and I didn't understand how to adapt to the way that the cultural norms were, or the way that they wanted to conduct business, even the way that I spoke, right? And it wasn't until I met a young Chinese girl who was the assistant in the office, who kind of guided me in the right way. And she showed me, you need to slow down. Not so many hand movements. Don't talk so fast, right? There could be a language barrier, right? Understand how to build a relationship. That might take 6 months before you get a customer. Right. So I had to change my hard selling on the phone to face-to-face relationship building, understanding consultative selling instead of just selling, right? Features and benefits, really understanding how to get into the person's life. Right. And I adapted and it morphed. I even decided to marry the girl eventually and have children with her. And we're married 10 years.
You didn't know you were being sold that day too.
I probably was. The point is, when I look at it, we have to understand when we think about entrepreneurship, we have to understand, the rules of the game, right? And if we think about internationally, what are the rules of the game? We have to understand, what's the political environment? What is the legal system? What are the regulations within, especially financial services? Lots of regulations with the SEC and FINRA and, the regulatory bodies. But we also have to understand some of those informal aspects, which are the culture. Right? How is the culture different from mine? What about the norms? How people like to conduct, business, right? Because sometimes you can do something that you think is right and it's just wrong for that particular setting. Even when we're hiring people or working with people, we're in such a global world that it's not uncommon to have someone from, maybe from China or from Italy or the UK or Africa or Germany. We have a very diverse global pool of workers. Okay, but when I speak to someone from one country, doesn't necessarily mean I'm taking the same approach with someone else, right? And then we have to understand our own resources and our capabilities,
Yeah.
If we don't have the capabilities, we better find the right people. And if we don't have the resources, we better find a rich uncle or aunt, maybe to get some money to get the resources. But it's these combination of these things that are really critical. On top of that, the layer is our own cognitive biases, our emotions, and the things that affect us on a day-to-day basis that sometimes we're unaware of. If we can put it all together, that's why we have billionaires in the world, right?
Yeah.
But even the billionaires fail. Okay,
Yep.
all of them have failed at one point.
Whew, okay. Well, you said it all, Mr. New Yorker. I think you need another quick lesson from the wife on this one. But you
I think
said
you're
it
bringing
all.
out of me, Rob. You have that personality, that energy,
Yeah.
that
Quit schmoozing me.
enthusiasm.
Quit schmoozing me. I've been listening to Howard Stern since I was 21 years old, and
Oh my
Howard always
gosh.
says, "Well, you said it all," and the guest knows what that means. But the book is Breaking Point: How Escalation of Commitment is Destroying the World and How You Can Save Yourself. And I want to tell you something. I thought it was interesting before we started. I really was. My first question out of the boat was, again, like, I don't know, you're kind of messing with something that's like a security blanket to me. But what an interesting take on this that you provide. And it's not an angle that that is instinctive for me at all. I think it's absolutely brilliant. There isn't a person listening right now who can't lean back and go, yep, I've had cognitive biases. I've held to ridiculous numbers and superstitions and everything but logical moves. And I think it sounds like a tremendous book. Folks, I not only want you to get on that list, but please, you can't do it till September because they won't let you anyway. But do an author a favor. Don't just buy the book, read the book. Wait a minute, you're not done. And then give a review on the book. It really matters. It means a great deal to authors. And you've got a book here that really is not your run of the mill, do good and good things happen. That's not the title of this book. So anyway, I applaud the concept you got here. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. How do people get a hold of you?
I have a website where we're revising it, okay, making it better. But my email's on there. I'm going to put my number on there. If you want to give my contact information out, I love speaking to everyone, right?
Okay.
Because I learn something every day.
Good. How about just I'll have it on the website and all that on my side. Okay. But just do you have either an email or website you can verbally give right now? If somebody,
sure, I'll give you the short email.
Okay.
It's Dr. V, just DRV. Okay, no dots. DRV at Vienna Cap, VIENNACAP.com. That's my investment banking email.
I see. I was sitting there going, "Oh no, I think this is going to be a long email if I'm no Vincent." But he's got a short one there. Congratulations. All right, Breaking Point, man. We know where the book is. We know what we're going to do when we find it. Again, thanks so much for coming in and teaching me a few things. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank you, sir, because you're changing lives every day. You're making a positive impact, and I admire that. And I want to wish you continued success in what you're doing. Right?
Very grateful. Thank you so much.
We'll
do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.